in my bubble, in the world in which I live, Donald Trump is anathema. Donald Trump is a criminal.
Howard Lieberman, Trump, progressives, and Democrats.
Donald Trump is destroying our democracy.
But we begin with...
Our guest is Senator Melisa Franzen.
I've shot a gun here and there, but I don't think there's a reason that I need access to a weapon of war.
This is Democratic Visions. Here's Tim.
Hello, welcome to another edition of Democratic Visions. Our guest is Senator Melisa Franzen. Senator Franzen represents Senate District 49, which is all of Edina, West Bloomington, and important smatterings of Eden Prairie and Minnetonka. First elected in 2012 with 53% of the vote. She was reelected in 2016 with 55% of the vote, and we're looking forward to at least getting to 60% this upcoming election. Welcome.
Thank you. High bars there.
Well, we don't want to never set the bar too low.
No.
So the focus of our discussion, Melisa, I think is going to be in the main about the last session of the legislature, adjourned on May 20. The Democrats had picked up 15 seats, so they took control of the House, and you guys fell a little bit short in the Senate. Thanks a lot. So we're going to have to turn that around, and I'm sure you'll be reelected, but we have to pick up 2 or 3 more seats also. I have a couple questions about process before we get into specific issues. And I know it may be unique because Minnesota is the only divided legislature in the country. But I was sort of struck by the fact that Melissa Hortman, House Speaker, Senator Republican Majority Leader Paul Gazelka, and the governor went into sort of a closed session that lasted nearly a week as they hammered out the global budget agreement. Did that surprise you, and do you agree with that kind of approach to government?
It doesn't surprise me, and I do not agree with it. I think it needs to be more transparent to the public, to the people who are electing us to make those decisions, and then to the chairs of those committees of jurisdiction, because if you leave the decisions of our state only to 3 or 4 people, that's really not representative of our state. Unfortunately, it came to that because we saw so much pushback from the Senate GOP, and that is why I'm so strongly working from now on until 2020 to change that, because even if we have the Senate all in Democratic control, it doesn't mean that we all agree, but we move forward and we find a path.
I have a second question about policy. After the governor and the leaders of the House and Senate had hammered out the budget agreement, then the various committees went into closed session to debate the language that was going to be put into each of those bills and how those monies are going to be allocated. Is that an appropriate process?
Well, after we saw what happened, it doesn't seem to be the right process. It just didn't work to agree on terms and then go back to the committees of jurisdiction and tell them to piece it together. Yeah. I think it should work the other way around. That's why we do the hard work for months on end to meet every day in committee and address the language and technicality of bills, and then to just leave it up to a few handful of people behind closed doors to put a budget together in the language of bills for our state is just ludicrous, frankly.
Well, I think it's, I view it as sort of a disservice to the individuals who have worked so hard throughout the legislative session and before, and perhaps including yourself. I don't know whether you were involved in those closed session workouts after the global budget agreement had been reached or not. But
well, we are all involved to one shape or form extent because we all have provisions in those bills that we want to make sure that they survive. And if you agree only on 5 terms and the other 5 fell off, you have to fight for them to get back on.
Now, I read your end of the session report, which you're very nice. I mean, you send out these reports maybe 8 to 10 times during the legislative session. If my recollection is correct, you said that your biggest concern coming out of the legislative session was the tap into the state reserves to the tune of some $400 million, leaving a paltry, relatively speaking, a reserve of $142 million. Did I read that correctly? Is that how you viewed the outcome from a financial point of view?
Well, I think we had some wins, and some of those wins were bipartisan, like elder abuse. We tackled that. We tackled opioid addiction. We tackled hands-free driving. You can't text anymore when you're on your vehicle, which is obvious, but we made it into law. But the biggest concern is in terms of having a budget session, having a surplus, and also tapping into the reserves. It just doesn't make fiscal sense to me to be doing that in a time when we know we're also going to, the economy is going to slow down as we have been indicated in the recent news.
Well, from my perspective, the Republicans in the Senate were intransigent. They weren't going to give on a number of issues, including taxes, and we'll come to that in a moment. But you did mention the hands-free driving. That was a bipartisan bill?
It was. The lead in the Senate was Senator Jim Carlson's been working on it for many years. It did get better over the years, but even it should have happened a long time ago, and it finally got some support, I think, most pushing from the public, which is great to hear from the public and our constituents. It really pushed us and drive us to make those decisions. So that did move forward finally.
And I haven't looked at the numbers, but did it pass overwhelmingly?
I believe so. I believe it was a very bipartisan and straightforward bill. I can't remember if anyone voted against it.
Now I want to turn to a couple of the tried and true topics that we have to talk about because they're so important. The first one is guns. What came out of the legislature to address, I should say, the problems that we've witnessed all over the country as far as mass shootings are concerned, and as you and I would know, could happen in Hennepin County, Ramsey County, the state of Minnesota very easily. Any movement in the legislature on guns this last session?
No, actually, I think it went backwards because the GOP in the Senate continues to block the conversation about it. Just this past few weeks when we met at the Minnesota State Fair, I bumped into Senator Gazelka, and he was telling me how we're one of the top 10 most restrictive states when it comes to gun laws. Well, we might be one of the most restrictive under his guise, but the reality is people are dying because they can get a gun pretty easily without a background check, and they can get a gun with some issues of mental health that we have to tackle. It's not just about guns, but it's also what the resources we put in to our health system in Minnesota. So it's a comprehensive issue, and we really haven't tackled it comprehensively.
I'm aware that the House passed the red flag laws, which in effect allow law enforcement or families to report to law enforcement somebody who's under mental stress or disability who they think may be a danger to themselves or others, and also the background checks. But what happens? They pass it, it comes to the Senate, does it just disappear?
It does. That's what's happening now with this debate, which is a very serious debate. I've been a co-author of the red flag law. It has been sponsored in the Senate by Senator Ron Latz from Golden Valley in St. Louis Park, and it has gotten better. The issue as well is with law enforcement, making sure that we're able to provide the resources so they can enforce it, and they are the ones who would be helping us enforce that, and we have to work with them, make sure that it does work with their force and they have the resources they need. But it's not something that we take lightly. When we are depriving someone from anything, we have to make sure that we are abiding by our state constitution and our federal constitution. So that is why I support it. I think it's certainly under the scrutiny that it would receive. It would be something that would be beneficial and a tool. So we have known people that could be a danger to themselves and to the public not be allowed to have the privilege of gun ownership or gun in their possession. I'm
aware again that the House measure that passed hit those two areas, but where it didn't apparently extend to would be a ban on assault weapons. Do you think that such a ban should be implemented in the state?
I do. There's no reason that any individual...
I haven't taken an AK-40 out.
I've shot a gun here and there, but I don't think there's a reason that I need access to a weapon of war in our state or in our country unless you are part of the military, unless you are fighting for our country in a war setting. And we are civilians, and we want to make sure that people are safe, and I think the current law is in place, and having ammunition to be able to kill multiple people. I don't think that's something that you need when you're hunting. And as I've been told before, a lot of hunters, and I've gotten emails from them, support these sensible law changes. And right now there's even a letter going out to the federal delegation talking about a whole bunch of companies, including Dick's Sporting Goods and others, that support these sensible changes. So you're seeing change, not just in the public, but also in corporate actors and people that really support sensible changes in this area.
I'm going to be sort of jumping from topic to topic. Tell me about education. I know that's one of your priority issues. Do you think that the legislature accomplished enough on education issues this last session?
Well, we are falling short on how we fund education. We keep trying to catch up, but the reality is we haven't kept up with inflation when it comes to a budget for education. Our teachers are not being paid in a way that would attract more teachers into the profession that's demanding more and more of them. Certainly the classroom has evolved, not just technology, but also the different subject matters that we're talking and teaching, and everything that we expect them from testing. So we can do more, and we should do more to collaborate with the public and the private sectors to really have well-rounded education for our students. I think when it comes to funding, we have to do more, and it's not just putting money in a budget, but knowing that those dollars are being used to keep up with the demands of the workforce.
Is there a schism between the two parties relative to funding of education? Do the Republicans focus on minimizing the amount to be spent, and Democrats perhaps want to promote additional programs or maintain, as you indicate, at least an inflation-adjusted rate of investment by the state?
Well, we have a constitutional mandate
I know
to
that.
fund education. So we, regardless of party, that is our duty and our priority. I think when it comes to party differences, a lot of it comes to wanting to spread those dollars to the private teaching sector, which I have no problem. I'm a product of both private and public education in K-12 and beyond. But when we have a mandate and we have limited resources, I would focus the attention and the demands of what the education system is needing, which is more resources to do more in making sure that our kids are being trained for the workforce of the future, and they have all the tools at their disposal to deal with the mental health crisis that we know families are going through, that obviously doesn't, comes into the classroom as well, and that we also have the creativity around for teachers to do their task and do their art of teaching. I sit next to Senator Swiecinski, and who's been a veteran teacher and retired teacher.
You pronounce his name better than I do.
Well, I sit next to him, and I've learned so much from him, and you can't pay them enough to do the work that we need for our state.
Let's talk about the legalization of adult use of recreational marijuana. You are a proponent of that, as I understand it, and introduced a bill to that effect. What happened to that bill?
Well, the recreational cannabis bill that I sponsored, there were multiple different bills, but the one I sponsored was the only bipartisan bill with Scott Jensen, senator from Chaska, Republican, who is a physician who also was curious, just like I was, of having this debate in the Senate. And we had a hearing, but it was not on the merits of the bill, but more on the merits of whether we should have the discussion. And it was unfortunate because I think we put a lot of thought into having a framework that's middle of the road, open for discussion and change, but certainly tackled a comprehensive structure and regulatory framework for the regulation of cannabis. And it's unfortunate that we weren't able to move the provisions forward or talk about the provisions, because right now we have a crisis of people vaping contents of THC and dying across our country and our state because they're going off the market and they're going in the black market to buy these products.
We'll touch on vaping in just a second, but did your bill call for a vote by the citizens of the state whether to amend the Constitution, or was this going to be done strictly legislatively?
It did not ask for a constitutional amendment. We thought that this is a job of the legislature to put in a proposal that we can be that could be vetted, and that we can tackle all the issues that entail the recreational use of cannabis. I think the states that have done it on a ballot initiative or a constitutional amendment, I think it's backwards, because then you have to rush and put something in place in a very short time frame that's not been thoroughly vetted. And my purpose of putting this issue out there was to vet an issue. And I've changed my mind on many provisions of the bill. I've talked to law enforcement. They're from Colorado, in fact, just last week.
Really?
And it actually puts the brakes on me in terms of moving forward. So I think we need to tread really, really slowly and do incremental in terms of how we approach the issue, and be very thoughtful about the framework of recreational cannabis, and really regulate it to a point that serves the public safety, and also those who can consume it just like alcohol in a very responsible manner.
You referenced vaping, and there's been actually startling reports of respiratory illness, even death here, including Minnesota, states including Minnesota. What do you think should be done? Should the state do a San Francisco and ban vaping?
Well, I don't know if we should go as far as that. I think we should have hearings of whether we have to. I think we have to put the public cautious on alert, the public on alert in terms of the risk. People are going to consume. They're going to vape. They're going to smoke. They're going to go on their way. But if the products are regulated, which is what we intend to do with recreational cannabis, I think people will be safer. I certainly think we should have an immediate hearing on this and talk to experts and decide if that's a way we should go in Minnesota.
Do you think that the age of vaping should be raised to 21?
I think 21 is an arbitrary number, frankly. When it comes to recreational cannabis, again, I've talked to doctors who want to push it all the way to 25 because of the brain development, and that's an issue that I care deeply. I have 2 young kids, 2 and 4, and I don't want to risk anybody's brain development, and that's typically what they say is until age 25 is where your brain continues to develop, and having the arbitrary age of 21 just because we have it for drinking doesn't mean it's a good policy decision. I'm open to it, but I'm also realistic that 21 has been kind of the age that we've adopted for many of these issues.
Time is running short in this interview, but I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up climate change. Did you support the bill that was backed by the governor and passed by the House, which would have made Minnesota carbon-free by 2050?
I support that ambitious goal and further ambitious goals because...
Like what?
Well, we have to figure out how we're going to deal with our landfills and how they're getting to be too, some of them are closing, and then it's costing us a lot of money to figure out what to do with this trash. So whether we have to deal with plastics and maybe restrict some use of it, and whether we have to restrict some use of styrofoam, we have to be bold about climate change, and it's about our trash, it's about our consumption and our culture of consumption, but it's also changing our habits to do more along the lines, not just recycling, but also composting. So I would really actually support bolder initiatives if they come forward, and I'm working on some myself.
Melisa, I have, as you can see in front of me, notes upon notes, which I'd love to be able to talk with you, but I think our time has run short. But I want to give you the opportunity of telling our viewers that, yes, I am running for re-election in 2020, and I intend to serve.
I intend to serve. I'm committed to the Minnesota Senate, and I've loved representing my district. It keeps me on my toes, and there's a lot of work ahead that I'm committed to fulfilling.
Melisa, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.
I'm your quintessential lefty liberal. And most of my world is lefty liberals. And we sit around and we talk. We talk about how horrible Trump is. We talk about how, yes, deplorable Trump supporters are. Right now, as I'm recording this, Donald Trump is at Target Center having a rally for his fans. When I came in this morning, I parked at ramp B, which is adjacent to Target Center. As I left the ramp, there is a long, long, long line of Trump supporters waiting to get into Target Center with the MAGA hats and the red T-shirts and the American flag draped all over them. Old people, young people, women, men, mostly white people. And this is when I came in earlier in the day. When I left at the end of the day, and it was 5:15 in the afternoon, there was a continuous stream still of thousands of people. And it struck me that in my bubble, in the world in which I live, Donald Trump is anathema. Donald Trump is a criminal. Donald Trump is destroying our democracy piece by piece by piece. And as I looked at the people today, I asked myself, who are these people? And I don't know. I don't really know who those people are. They look like everyday people. And it struck me that if I spend too much time in my own bubble with my own friends, people who share my point of view, I'm missing something. That this is not a slam dunk. This is not, to many people, an idiot, a criminal. This is their president who speaks to them, for them, and they will do anything to ensure, one, that he's not impeached, and two, that he gets reelected. And that, my friends, is a scary thought. Now, I'm going to brag for a moment. Prior to the election in 2016, I looked at my wife and I said, he's going to win. Donald Trump is going to win. And I thought that because there were three events. One was I met with a man who's an old union guy. And we know each other from my days in New York as the director of the Irish Art Center. An old Irish working class man. And he said, Howard, can I talk with you? I said, sure. He said, I can't talk to the rest of those folks because they don't listen. But you listen. He said, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. I think I probably went. And he said, let me tell you why. He said, I don't know if this is a good man or a bad man, but at least he thinks about and talks to the working person, the union man, and that Hillary Clinton doesn't even know we exist. All she knows is her Ivy League friends, and she doesn't care about us. I went, okay. Second thing, I'm a legal consultant, and I travel around the country, and I get to know everybody. I talk to who will ever listen. So I walked into the Philly office one day, a bastion of democratic liberalism. And the woman who was, and probably still is, the receptionist, because that was back in 2016, she looks at me, and she said, Howard, can I tell you something? Sure, I said. She said, I support Bernie. But if Bernie doesn't get the nomination, I'm going to support Trump. Again, I did a. She said, no, really. Because none of the rest of those people out there, those liberal Democrats, the Hillary Clinton, Ivy League types, give a good, I think she probably used a good strong Philly word, but we'll just say a good gosh darn about people like me. Third thing, shortly before that election, I'm an actor, and I was asked to play the role of a Trump supporter, and my point of view was going to be Trump is the only real third-party candidate who could win this election. And I was very compelling. I was very compelling, and the audience pretty much wanted to run me off the stage. They started throwing things at me. The bartender came out from the bar, this was in the theater, with a beer bottle in his hand, and he wanted to kill me. They actually had to protect me and take me off stage and usher me out. And that's when I looked at my wife and I said, he's going to win. He's going to win. And he did. When I saw that long line of people waiting to see and cheer for Donald Trump, I realized these are mostly working class men and women. They're just everyday Americans. And they don't believe that the Democratic Party speaks to them. It's full of newfangled ideas. It's full of socialism. It's full of diversity, all those people kind of thing. And it's for open borders and their way of life. They see their way of life as being threatened. They want someone who says, I hear you. I will do what I can to make this country what you believe it was when you could have a job in a factory and support a family. And we didn't have to worry about all this what bathroom do I use? What bathroom do they use? They want what they perceive to be normal America. Most of the people who they perceive as the liberal elite wouldn't know how to punch a time card if their life depended on it. And that's what scares me. So before you sit back and enjoy a glass of white wine with your dinner tonight, reflect on the fact that there are a lot of people in this country who aren't like you, who aren't like me, but are Americans nevertheless, and they want to hang on to whatever view of the world that they have. And that means supporting their champion, I'll say it a third time, their champion, Donald Trump. Be afraid. It could happen again.
Democratic Visions is handcrafted by volunteers from Eden Prairie, Edina, Minnetonka, Hopkins, and Bloomington. Watch us on select community access channels and on YouTube. This is Carol Sundstrom.